Are you recording?
I'm recording. Let's do this.
This is a sprint. We only get one crack at this. Did you know that?
I know.
Did you know that that's what happens?
I'm curious to see what you're bringing in today.
Oh, I got a thing. I've got a thing. I don't know how it's going to work.
Sure.
But I've got a thing.
You look like you're paging through something right now.
I'm going to start a timer just because I think that's important.
Got it.
Yes. So this is a sprint. This is my turn. Last sprint that we did was Brandt, and he did one that was terrifying and awful. So hopefully I get to do one that's good.
I'm excited.
The idea behind this is that I know the topic. Brandt does not know the topic. So minimal editing, about a half hour is our target. And we get live reaction from Brandt, which is going to be very, very exciting.
Curious what you're going to pull out of your hat today. So this is going to be good.
Well, there's a couple of things. And I guess it's best. Let me start off with a story. I like storytelling. So
Stories are good.
Let me work on that and see if this helps. Old-time loggers passed down their favorite Paul and Babe stories over the years. And here are how some of those stories go.
Oh.
It caused quite an excitement in the woods that day when 5 giant storks working in relays delivered Paul to his parents. And what a baby Paul was. It took a whole herd of cows to keep his milk bottle filled, and he could eat 40 bowls of porridge prepared every 2 hours. Who makes porridge? Kitchens to keep his stomach from rumbling and knocking the house down. Paul grew so fast.
How fast did he grow?
That 1 week... That 1 week after being born, he had to wear his father's clothes. A lumber wagon drawn by a team of horses from Buena Vista's logging village was Paul's baby carriage. By the time Paul was 1 year old, his clothing was so large...
How large was it?
He had to use wagon wheels for buttons. Only the great outdoors was big enough to accommodate Paul, and it was only natural that he become not only our lumberjack, but the world's greatest lumberjack.
Amen to that.
All right. That's the end of our podcast.
Should I be wearing my suspenders today?
I wore my Paul Bunyan t-shirt.
Hey, there you go.
See,
there it is.
Brandt, today's sprint topic is folklore. Folklore.
Oh, okay.
Folklore.
I love it.
All right. So that was just a little flavor. That was one aspect of folklore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the telling of a story, a fable, if you will, passed down from generations to generations, an oral history tradition. Mm-hmm. And that's so that was like a folk tale, a story. Now, folklore can be broken out into several different topics. Can you give me some of them? Here's the quiz. Ready, go.
Topics of folklore.
Yeah, what other folk things? Yeah. What other folk things exist?
There are fables.
Yes, stories. So folk tales or folk stories. Yep.
There are parables. There are lessons sometimes within the stories.
Lessons in the story. Correct.
Okay. How am I doing?
You're doing great. There's also folk art.
Yes.
There's also folk heroes.
Oh, okay. We're going with the folk thing. Like the people made.
And then there's also folk songs or folk music.
Folk music's good stuff.
Why? Why do we have these things? Why do they exist? And why on God's green earth, on a podcast that values the skill of listening, why are we talking about folklore?
Folklore. All right, I'm going to take a stab at this. So
fire away.
It is any like folklore, folk music, stories like that. They are passed down orally. So it is not in writing, but it is through telling of the story and listening to that story over and over again that we remember it. So that's the listening component. You're shaking your head, so I think I'm on the right track.
Yes. Oh, where are we on TV?
We're on a video chat.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So the listener can thank you for describing. Yes, you are exactly right. So you have and a little bit of research because I did a little bit of preparation. Folk tales, fairy tales, folklore, that sort of thousands of years old. Thousands, multi-generational.
Yeah. They're passed down.
Perhaps some of the ones that we are most familiar with fall into the realm of, I don't know, maybe the last 300 to 400 years or so.
Okay.
But think about how many generations that is and where that comes from. Now, we started off this entire podcast talking about our good friend Paul Bunyan.
Yes.
I think to some of our listeners out there, they might that might strike a little bit of a chord. We've got some fans we've got some fans from yesteryear when Brandt and I worked at a camp together, and we did lots of Paul Bunyan tales.
Right.
But for those that don't know that, we'll give you just the little skinny on this. Brandt and I worked at a camp. This was 20 plus years ago. And that camp was in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. It did a lot of Paul Bunyan, and go ahead and Google Paul Bunyan if you've never heard of him, or Pauline. We are a equal opportunity podcast here. Pauline Bunyan, his wife. And, we told stories in front of kids on a particular thing called Paul Bunyan Day, where we celebrated the folklore of the lumberjacks in that area. So it's just a little thing between us. Why did we do that? Who cares, Brandt? Why did we spend perhaps way too long?
Too much time.
Why did we get dressed up? Why did we act these things out? Why did we do all of this on this particular day, at this particular camp, at these particular times? Why did we do it?
We are looking at the history of the area. So if you look at northern Wisconsin, when Wisconsin became a state around that time, there was woods up here, old growth woods, and the settlers, cities and whatnot, needed lumber to build. This area was logged, and not just logged. This area was clear cut to the point of it was bad. But
clear cut meaning all gone.
All gone. All gone.
All the woods. So many woods that you would never run out.
Correct, but they did.
Then they ran out.
So the logging camps, the people that were up, they needed the people to cut things down. And they had to hire workers that wanted a job, hire workers that were okay with taking low pay, working hard, long hours, being away from their family, and coming up north to put in way too much work to cut down all these trees. So that it is the stories that they would tell to each other, probably to keep themselves sane, that they would tell to each other. That's where the Paul Bunyan stories came from, were these tall tales of loggers telling stories, basically to kind of help get through it.
Well, right. I mean, these guys worked all of the time, long days. They worked all these hours. They worked summers. They worked winters. And there was actually one winter that there were 2 winters. The snow was so deep that year that Paul had to dig down to find the trees. That's how the Lost 40 was overlooked. Leaving a change in landscape there still today. And it was so cold.
How cold was it?
At the logging camp, that the words froze in midair. When the words thawed out in that spring, there was a huge roar of clatter and conversation heard 600 miles away. That year, too, the fish were so cold.
How cold were they?
They grew fur like a bobcat over their fins. Ever since, loggers say ice fish. Say ice fish, and you may just catch a fish with fur, and we don't mean a catfish. So that's just another example of a Paul Bunyan story, because we need to overload this podcast with Paul Bunyan stories.
So here's what I like about it, though, is it is a fun story. They were not having fun, all right?
They were. Oh, this was terrible.
And
this is a terrible environment.
A lot of what is popularized Paul Bunyan was not so much just the logging stories. It was people trying to market logging camps and getting people to work, that they turned Paul Bunyan into this marketing thing, saying, hey, here's this larger than life guy and his blue ox and these fun stories. It made it seem appealing when you are emphasizing, the strength that it takes and the hard work that is there. We glorify these things and hold them in virtue because of how intense they are. So over time, we get to telling these stories now, and it's more like a cartoon or like a fairy tale than it is a depiction of real life. But it's
Correct.
our way of remembering it.
Yep. So, yeah, I mean, and again, we're in a very specific 20 years ago, and this camp still does it today. We're telling these stories, and they're very dramatic, and they're folky, right? I mean, if you just kind of say it, they're folky. They're these bizarre characters and all these different things. And when we tell the story, it's kind of like a cartoon. We kind of envision this cartoon, but that's how the stories continue on, and they evolve over time. Those stories were stemming from something, and you're exactly right. They were stemming from miserable conditions: hot, cold, buggy, sweaty, humid, the hard labor and dangerous work. None of that stuff is depicted in these stories. It's all fun and games and neat and grandiose types of things. So it's just, that's kind of part of that folklore. And when we get, I'm going to throw out some things here. So what is folk? What does that mean? And Brent, you already hit on a couple of things already. The common people, right? Yeah. So we tell this story in the Northwoods of Wisconsin because you can picture yourself there. Now Minnesota might make claim to these stories as well, but it's really northern Wisconsin. We all know that. And Canada might jump in.
You're picking a fight.
Washington State might jump into some of this as well, but we all know that it's Wisconsin. But there probably aren't a whole lot of Paul Bunyan stories that really hit home in Florida. So you kind of have to have this common theme, these common people, and be in that environment for them to really, really hit home in this particular example. So common people, common place, and a strong sense of tradition. That's where this folklore thing comes from. It can happen all over the country. You can have great folk songs from the Tennessee region, from the Blue Ridge Mountains. You can have great folk songs from that area. You can have great folk songs from California. But how is it? It's all about the common people, the common place, and those traditions.
And going back to that oral tradition, it's the same with folk music. It is not learning it from reading the music. It is learning from listening to others play the music and learning from them on how they are playing the instrument. And those are passed down and change over time and over regions, where a folk song 200 miles away might have a slight variation on it just because of the path that those stories took, which is really cool. If you've ever talked to people that just went out and studied folk music and the path of folk music, it's fascinating to hear about how these evolve and take their own shape over time.
Great point. And jumping into folk music a little bit here, I did a little more research and preparation for our show today. Thank you very much. One of the top charts folk music that exists, "This Land Is Your Land" by Woody Guthrie.
Sure.
How many times has that song been sung, and by how many other artists ever in the history of the song?
I'd say millions.
Millions. Why is that?
Why?
Yeah. Why this song? Why the folklore? Why sing it, your version of it?
It's a fun song.
It's a fun song. Written in 1940, almost 80, 70, 85 years ago.
Sure.
Sing it over and over and over again. Shares the same story. Common land, common people, common tradition. Folk music. Blowing in the Wind, Bob Dylan. City of New Orleans by Steve Goodman. If I Had a Hammer by Pete Seeger. Yeah. Just some example. We Shall Overcome by Pete Seeger. Just some examples. The Circle Game by Joni Mitchell.
Yeah. You're kind of getting into that period where folk music was getting a bigger following, and it started to get into more commercial, into larger venues. It wasn't just in small little communities anymore. We're talking Newport, right? Bringing this to the big stage, and people really enjoying it.
Yeah, and it struck a chord, literally and figuratively, with larger groups of people, and it kind of became that that folksy time, 40s and 50s, but probably mainstream in the 60s and 70s. We're talking Simon and Garfunkel, Gordon Lightfoot, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell,
Sure.
Pete Seeger we've already talked about. So, these are very, very recognizable names that took this folk music and made it quite popular, and it struck a chord with, generally speaking, the American people. Just across the board, America became the common people and the commonplace, or that, those teens and 20s and maybe 30s, kind of that getting into that hippie area a little bit. I could say that those were common people with a common place or in a common place, celebrating traditions or creating new ones. Folklore, folk music. I got another topic for you in the folk world.
What do you got?
In the folk world, folk heroes.
Yes. What's a folk hero? Because we're not talking stories now, are we? Are we talking real people?
So this is interesting because, again, doing a little bit of research. If you Google folk heroes, it goes back, again, hundreds, thousands of years. But if you get into kind of the more recent, what they would call, I don't know, in the last 200 years or so, there's a ton. Now, this is Wikipedia, so it's kind of up for interpretation a little bit. But worldwide, there's a lot of folk heroes. A lot of the ones that are listed for Americans are a lot of the old like cowboys.
Sure.
A lot of things coming out of the Wild West. So this is Jesse James and Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp. Who else? Butch Cassidy. This is kind of this train robbers and cowboys, and this kind of thing really, really solidified itself in the realm of folk heroes in that sense.
How far does this go? Because what I'm hearing is they did something good or bad, and stories started going out about them, and then those stories were shared, and those stories were shared. And suddenly the story of that person was bigger than the person itself.
Bingo.
Like John Dillinger, for instance, the stories about him made him larger than life than, he really was. And he kind of played out that character in a way, but he was very much a folk hero in a way.
Billy the Kid, Bonnie and Clyde. And this, Brandt, I think, let's pick that apart a little bit, because I think what you're getting to, unlike Paul Bunyan, sorry, realists out there, but Paul Bunyan is a fictional character. I believe he's real. I also believe
in your heart,
in my heart, he is very real. But he is, in fact, sorry to burst everyone's bubble, a fictional character.
Sure.
When you're talking about all the names that we just listed off, those people are real, but they all fall into this folklore, or this, folk heroes, and this interesting and funny use of the word hero, right? They all fit into this folk, and you said it, because of the stories. Pick that apart for me.
Yeah,
why?
The stories,
why do the stories?
Yeah.
Why do the stories matter? Why does it matter?
It strikes a chord with the people, and we want to learn there's something to take away from, or something to. What am I trying to say? There's like a stickiness to it, a popularity. There's something about it that resonates with people, where they have to share that story. Like, oh my gosh, did you hear about, kind of getting back into our eavesdropping episode, where like, oh my gosh, did you hear about this? This is amazing. This person just did this crazy thing, right? Let me tell you about this lady I heard of, Joan of Arc, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very much a folk hero in a sense.
Yeah. So and again, I think it's about the stories and how those stories take the different shapes of what's true and what's not true, and how did it turn into these the story itself, or the idea of the human through the storytelling took on a life of its own. John Dillinger, Billy the Kid. If you're hearing some of these stories as a kid, maybe from 20, 30 years ago, maybe from today. But as these stories were taken off, how many kids in the 50s and 60s were imagining that they were a cowboy, and in the 70s and 80s? I don't mean to, and maybe today yet, but like the ideology of like running around with a cap gun and a cowboy hat and doing all of these. Why are you doing that? You're doing that because of the stories, because of the advertising, because of the toys, but because of the stories, and you're turning this into this character that you want to be. Was
Yeah.
Billy the Kid a good person?
No.
No, he was a terrible person. He robbed banks. He killed people. He was an outlaw. You know, he was a terrible, terrible person. He was 14 years old when he committed his first crime.
Oh, really?
Oh my God, he was Billy the Kid was awful. But we're growing up as little kids, and I'm gonna be Billy the Kid, or I'm gonna be John Dillinger. John Dillinger robbed banks.
Right.
He hurt innocent people. It's just like the Paul Bunyan thing. This lifestyle of being a lumberjack was a terrible lifestyle. It was hard, nasty work. But we turned it in through folklore. We turned it into something more like a movie or more like a cartoon to, I don't know, just to share the story through the storytelling, through the listening of the stories.
When we can take a story and make it interesting, make it fun, it sticks more. That story is more likely to get passed on the more interesting it is. And that's where we start to veer from like fact and truth a little bit, right? I think of a lot of just, stories we talk to our kids about, either if it's fictional people or real people. Same with songs. We can remember music easily. If it's a catchy tune, it's easier to memorize and easier to sing. That message is easier to pass along as we do that. Where we can get tripped up, though, is where we think or believe that the folk hero version of the person is their real self, where we may lose some of the historical accuracies of things. So I think it's a great way to introduce people to different events that have happened throughout history. But it's just kind of that introduction first layer, right? To get us introduced to it. And then from there, it's like, okay, now we need to ask some questions. Was this Billy the Kid guy, a good guy or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know, right? I just know the name.
You just know the name. You've heard of the guy before. John Dillinger. You say that name and you can kind of envision what it looks like and what the movies may have depicted him as. Not a nice human. A couple of things with this, Brandt, and I think some of the words, how I love boiling things down to words. Pop culture or popularity and culture. I think that there's a piece to this that folklore is not just American. We're just speaking about it through our American lens because that's what we grew up around. But proven, it is a fact that there's folklore throughout the world. And each culture, each commonplace, common people, the culture there and the folks there, see what I did there? They have their own versions of all of these stories. It's very important and very critical that these oral stories, this oral history is passed down. Now, some of it's not very nice, and we turn it into nice things, but other things like fairy tales and things of that nature, totally fine. They might have weird messages tied to them and maybe and maybe not be they might be a little rough around the edges, but still important, still part of the culture.
The other piece with that too is it is the people that is, you don't need to be highly specialized to tell a folk story, right? You don't have to go through years of training to tell a folk story. Nope. Folk art is just, you don't need to have advanced art training to do folk art. You use what's around you to make something into art. And that is the people being able to express themselves.
Yeah. I think that's a great point too, because it's meant to be passed down. It's meant to be simplified so it can be remembered. It's meant to be listened to, and it's meant to be told. So if you make it real complex, you make it real complicated. Folk songs, generally speaking, are not real complicated, super crazy artistic songs. There's probably 3 chords and a pretty good lyrics that go along with it. It's probably a catchy tune, and most people can grab their guitar and sit down and figure it out fairly quickly so that they can share that experience and tell that story to the next group of people.
Yeah, it's fun to be able to jump in and sing along or play along or, come together and over a shared experience.
Exactly. And that's the fun behind it. All right, so we've got folk songs shared around a campfire. If you start singing "This Land Is Your Land," I bet you 80% of the people are going to be able to start singing along with you. You've got folk heroes. You have some of them that are complete fiction that have been made up over the decades, over the centuries, and those stories continue to move forward through popularity and culture and common people. And then you've got the ones that were that did actually exist, and maybe we have, through the stories, idolized them a little bit more than what they should have been through the decades, through the centuries. You have folk art, all kinds of different. I mean, that is a whole nother topic in itself. Yet, but this folk art, the idea is that it's beautiful, it's original, but it's really quite known for its simplicity. And I'm not an art critic, so if I got that wrong, don't hang me. But then you also have this folklore. That was my topic. Brandt, it's already been a half hour. What's your takeaway on folklore? And I'm listening.
My takeaway is that I just think of telling stories to my kids and the familiarity that comes with those stories, right? It's like comfort food in a way. It's the folk music, folk stories, folk heroes is comforting because it's familiar, and it's something that was passed down to us and something we passed down to them. So there is a comfort in the familiarity of those stories and being part of it. What's your takeaway?
I really like this topic. It strikes a chord with me. It is something that I think is really important, and I fear is being tossed aside a little bit. And I encourage all of those listening to pick up a book, find an old book of fairy tales, find an old book of Paul Bunyan stories, find an old book of wherever you're from. Ask your grandparents if they're still around, or your parents, or do a little research. Find out what that folklore of the area that you're in, even if you didn't grow up there, like what is it about your place, and what are some of those tales, and what are some of those stories that really drive home kind of that folklore about your place? Because I think it's been around for centuries. It's really important. And then being that storyteller or learning some of those things and sharing that with other people, try it out. See how they listen. Practice your storytelling and see how they will listen to you in that sense. And then Brandt, I just have just one more comment about all of this, and that is Babe the Blue Ox. And if there's anything about Paul Bunyan, we all knew, and even if you don't, we'll educate you right now that his sidekick was Babe the Blue Ox. Babe was said to weigh 10,000 pounds and measured 7 axe handles between the eyes. Apparently, some of the lakes in Wisconsin are the holes actually made by Babe's feet. But how did he become blue, you ask? Well, one year, it snowed blue snow for 7 days. Why, you ask? Who cares? And Babe laid out the whole time, that silly boy, and ended up turning from white to blue because of the blue snow. Babe was as strong as he was large. Together with Paul, they pulled entire houses up the hills. Paul would pull the logs, and Babe would pull the cellar. And Brandt, I leave you with that, the story of Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox.
What about Elmer the reversible dog?
Oh, you mean Sport the reversible dog?
Sport the reversible dog. I got that wrong.
You mean Johnny Ink Slinger?
Oh, yes.
You mean Elmer? Was he the cook? Was Elmer who was the cook?
Might have been the cook.
Was he the camp cook? I don't know. You got to dig this stuff up, man. I challenge you to read your kids this week, to read your kids some stories of Babe the Blue Ox and Paul Bunyan.
Oh, well, we're definitely going to dive into that. That'll be fun.
Brandt, thank you for entertaining me. Thank you for listening along on the realm of folklore and how it applies to listening. Please, folks.
Thanks for bringing this topic.
You're welcome. Please, folks, keep it alive. It's too good to let it go. Keep it alive. We've given you lots of different folk tales, folk songs, folk heroes. Dig them up. Take a little adventure next time you listen to this and share some of those stories and see how well people pay attention and listen to you. I bet you they do.
And Drew will post a link to his favorite stories.
The amount of references that are going to be in this podcast notes, there's going to be 7,000 of them. So check out the podcast notes.
That's awesome.
I'll kick you off with all the things we started with today, so we can get you down that path. All right, Brandt.
Cool.
Thanks for listening to me today and all of my stories.
True, it was a lot of fun. So thank you.
All right, my man. I'll talk to you later.
All right,
Bye.
Cheers.
In the description of this podcast, you will find more information and a list of any of the sources that we used.
This podcast is created and produced by Drew Richmond and Brandt Christofferson. Editing by me, and the I'm Listening theme music by Drew.
That's me.
That's you.
Brandt, I will talk to you later, my friend.
We'll see you next time.
Yeehaw.
Have a good one, Drew.
Bye, Brandt.